Okay. Part two, the sword as a base of training and how and what one trains with in order to understand and apply this training to all aspects of the art. Okay. So, how does specifically the sword, how do you work with a sword to understand grappling and striking? Kazushi, atemiwaza, okay, footwork, etc. All right. The big thing to understand is that when you're training with a sword, it's easy to get focused on the cuts. And Brian, I'm talking to you now. This focus, it's kind of a trap because you will find that what you want to really be working with is understanding the other three elements that we discussed in the first video, okay? Your distance, your timing, and your intent. So, your movement, your ability to understand elements of explosiveness, quickness, deceptiveness through your movement dynamics will set your cuts up so that by the time you actually are cutting with a blade, it's the least part of the training that is important. You learn more about cutting with a knife if you go into a kitchen and start chopping things up than you do, you know, swinging a sword around. Okay? It's just a fact. So the training involves understanding positioning with that weapon. Okay? Understanding essential elements of timing, which, again, things levels to the game here. Timing, when you're working with timing in an engagement with the weapon, you want to refer to beats, okay? One beat, half a beat, quarter beat, or third of a beat, okay? Those are your elements. You develop your explosiveness and your quickness through not trying to be fast, okay, and not trying to cut hard. You develop that through your timing on the beat scale. So, for example, if somebody is coming down one beat, okay, you know that in order to be in position before their cut is completed, you have to be half a beat. You don't have to move faster than them. You will in order to do that, but you don't look at it that way, okay? It doesn't, it's not reflexive if you're trying to be fast. It's simply a matter of timing. If this is one, then you have to move half a beat. One, okay? One, one, okay? Half a beat to one beat, all right? That's how you set up your timing, okay? A good example of that is when you're actually doing a cut where you come through the person totally, that you see a lot in the movies, which is very hard to duplicate in real life, okay? Cutting through a person. So when you cut through a person in real life, all the person has to do is drop the sword to stop your cut, all right? So the elements that make you able to make that cut are how you position yourself initially so that you can be in position to make that cut, okay? How you position the angle of your attack so that as you make that cut, you can move past because you can't stop to cut. You have to keep moving. Otherwise, Ayuchi, the person, will cut you reflexively. Just even as if they're killed, their arm will come out with a sword and it can catch you, okay? And the third is getting in there at a little ahead of one beat, considering that whatever they do will be, we'll call it arbitrarily, a one beat movement, okay? So if they're going to be here, you have to be half of that one, 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 okay? And then the second half, you've cut through, okay? So those elements will determine when you start to cut what kind of cut you use, how you're going to use it, okay? Take a kukure. a kukri has a nice little shape where it has a little horseshoe in the middle between the larger leaf part of the blade and the handle. Okay? The cut movement, if you catch the person in that little horseshoe area of the kukri, okay, right around something, okay, you now have position so that you just have to come with the rest of the knife through and you can cut. But in that initial position, it gives you the option of chopping, okay, or cutting. So I can hit you with that kukri, okay? Or I can cut you with initially making that contact at that point and dragging the blade through. Now, once I understand that, that's a relatively simple thing, okay? And once we're practicing our forms, we understand this movement as a shuto, as a cut, then we can just elevate that with that understanding of how to use that weapon, okay? I'm going to show you that. Hang on a second. Okay. So, all right. So you see this little area here, okay? That's the horseshoe, okay? You catch this, and now you can make that cut. So when I'm learning how to cut with this, okay? That's instrumental to cutting with this weapon, okay? So when I catch something, I want to understand that here I have the option of hitting, okay? And I have a much sort of better options because I can hit and I can drag this through to cut, or I can hit hard enough so that I have this whole secondary part of the weapon, okay, that I can bring to force here on this part to hit as well, okay? But if I catch you here, okay, I've initially done this work and now I just have to drag this across, okay? That's an example. Your practice should consist of how you put yourself in that position to make that cut, okay? Now, let's start to translate this a little bit into hitting, okay? Where we can see this connection, okay? The same principles apply to Dakin. Instead of focusing on learning how to throw different types of punches, you do all that, but the focus of the training is when you're in a certain position to hit, okay, what is the best outcome for striking, okay? And it'll teach you the same basic principles. So, for example, if I'm coming here, okay, to try to come across, okay, like this, okay, understanding stopping here, I have a straight line that I can strike at, okay? The difference between that and this, which most people do, which is too far, and it looks really good in a demo, but especially when I'm standing still, there's way too much tactile for the person to respond to that and to offset what you're doing. The technique is here, okay? Boom, it's initial. Just like with a center block in karate, okay? We'll refer back to karate because it's really nice and simple. You can cover this whole area in front of your body very quickly, okay? And just come forwards, okay? And by having this in the right position, you now have an option where you can grab, okay? You don't have to try to trap, okay? Positioning, your intent, and your distance determine that, okay? If I'm here and I catch your fist, you have a lot of power out here to pull back, to come in. On the other hand, if I catch you midway here, for example, I can very easily turn your elbow, okay? I can very easily hit this down and strike here, okay? So these are the elements that you have to look at. Your positioning, your timing, okay? Let's look at the beat. If I'm throwing this punch, okay, here, and you're doing a nagash movement where you're striking my hit, okay? If you do that movement beat to beat, one, then you might catch the fist, you might not, okay? Let's say I want to hit, like in Koku, in Gyokuryu, I want to strike with a follow up shuto to that arm, okay? It's not a question of whether you can do it or not. A lot of people say, oh, that's too slow for a punch. It's your timing, okay? What you have to understand when you practice that technique is it's not this 1, 2. And most people practice it that way, okay? It's rather 1, okay? 1, okay? 1, okay? So you use your beat system to determine and dictate your timing. That develops fluidity and quickness, okay? So now I'm here, okay? Reflexively, I can start an attack towards your center line at that point, okay? Same principles apply, okay? Reflexivity is subconscious. You learn good movement habits, okay? Something comes this way, you can't necessarily anticipate it. But if you keep practicing this, you become very natural. And what happens is, if somebody attacks you here, you don't just do this so they can hit you again, okay? So you've maybe caught them here, and they're coming with the next punch. The proper practice is not to practice 1, 2, okay? Or 1 finger jab, 1 finger. No, that's not the right timing. It's not the right intent, okay? The intent is, oh shit, okay? It's like you touched the hot stove, okay? Something comes here, bam! Your hand is out, striking. And then you can start to form what's called a cyber chain, a set of possibilities to pursue keeping your opponent off balance. Only after you've done that reflexively. And now before you can even think about what you've done and freeze and all that, you've gotten a response, okay? You more or less sometimes will, even after a situation, have to back up and say, well, what did I do? I've had this happen. Okay, I speak from experience. Okay, actually, the technique I just showed you, I did to somebody in a real situation. So the point is developing the right training habits, okay, will show you how to do these things properly, okay? And that is, I think, a perfect example. Sword, ultimately, is timing intensive, okay? And a lot of what you're doing with the sword as you make these movements, okay, has to do with how you're setting up your footwork, okay, your body, your taijutsu, okay, all these different things, so that you can cut the person, or you can make a situation where you affect them. Now, this is very important because you're not always going to be able to hit the person with one shot. But again, I wanted to talk about karate because karate is a great example. In traditional karate, and the idea, even though it's emphasized in Shotokan, has been in karate before that, 1 strike, 1 kill, okay? Hitting something to break it, okay? To damage it, okay? We did a lot of breaking. People laugh at that now, but it teaches you mentally how to hit an object and affect it, psychologically to go through the object, okay? Very important, okay? And what this means is that when you're practicing whatever type of punch you're using or shuto, what you should be practicing is hitting through that object, okay? Hitting explosively, okay? Hitting with intent to do harm, to break. But also, when you're making a person yield, understanding the difference between making them move backwards where they're not as effective, where they don't have their balance or their base to attack, versus not doing anything of any real value whatsoever and just, doing it anyway, which is what most people do. It's called sparring, okay? Sparring is okay in certain things, but it's not intense enough. You should be fighting in your sparring to really understand how things work in combat. Unfortunately, you just have to do that. All right, we're going to do our final segment, and I'll elaborate a little bit more on this last point of Kazushi. Okay?